Hello all, Mike Logan, Ask Mike the Counselor, Nexus and headquarters of Logan Enterprises. I have been working with domestic violence clients for about 12 years now, and I want to talk to you a little bit about grief counseling techniques. There is an incredible amount of grief work that comes up in domestic violence groups. Seldom are the men who are referred to my program for court-ordered counseling ever get taught anything about the grieving process. Nor do they get permission to grieve when a divorce happens, or they're abused by their fathers as a kid, or they get in a fight, or they're sent off to prison or jail. Any of those things, men don't get permission to grieve routinely. And so one of the things I teach early on is the Kubler-Ross model of grieving. And it's a 5-stage model, and the reason I teach this particular model, it's actually more appropriate to people who have just received a terminal illness diagnosis at a hospital, is simply to indicate to the men in the program that there's a rhyme and a reason to grieve. And it can be managed. It can be attended to. While it's powerful, it doesn't need to overwhelm the rest of your life. You just need to develop the skill to sort of flip back and forth. Grief can even be bookmarked. In other words, if it comes up in the middle of this video, I could say, grief, we're going to have to bookmark you. I'll come back to you at 5 p.m. And then at 5 p.m. tonight, after I'm done seeing clients, for example, I can come back to the grief. Now, the Kubler-Ross model has 5 stages. The first stage is simply denial. That's a psychological or a tool that our psyche uses to help us manage the intensity of the bad news that we just received. If it came all at once, if we had to handle it all at once, it might be overwhelming. The next step in the Kubler-Ross model, stage 2, is bargaining. That's where you might say, if your child is ill, for example, God, take me instead. The third stage is anger, and that's where you're angry, even at yourself, at God, at the person who's leaving, if it's a death, for example, or has left. And it's typical, and in the West, oftentimes men get stuck at this stage, and this is where it's dangerous in relationships. Because if my significant other were to say to me, I'm leaving, that might touch on a grief that happened when I was a child, and I'm looking at 2 significant losses that never got dealt with in the sense of processing the emotions and the hurt and the abandonment. Okay, the 4th stage is typically the sadness and the melancholy and the tears and maybe even a little depression, and that is normal. And that's oftentimes when anger is used to fend off, because it's a vulnerable place, and men are taught not to be vulnerable. And the 5th stage is acceptance. Now, for an important loss in your life, the grieving process can take up to 2 years. A parent, a child, your life has changed forever. And the purpose of grief is to help you walk through this winter of life so that you can come to a spring. If you don't process grief effectively, it's my belief that you will not be able to trust or love as effectively in the future. So it's very important that you go through this process. You invite it. You work with it. Art work is good. Grief groups are good. The tough part for guys, especially in domestic violence groups, is to understand that this is not a linear process. I don't spend 2 hours on denial and 2 hours on bargaining and 2 hours on anger and 2 hours sad, and then it's all done. It's not like that. It can come and go. And you might flip from stage 1 to stage 4 to stage 3 to stage 5. You move around in it, and it's important for men to understand that. Okay, I want to thank you for your time today. Mike Logan, AskMikeTheCounselor2.com, talking about grief counseling and grief counseling techniques. Thank you.